In the year 256 BC, the sea was the stage of Gids and empires. Dawn broke over the Sicilian coast, and the Mediterranean shimmered like a sheet of molten bronze. Across its waters, two powers stayed at each other, one from the sands of Africa, the other from the hills of Italy. To the west stood Carthage, mistress of the seas, her triremes as swift as falcons, her marinas heirs of ancient Phoenicia. To the east, Rome, young and restless, a land-born republic whose legions had never feared a battlefield, until now. For generations, the waves had belonged to Carthage. But that morning, Rome came to claim them. Over 300 warships lined the horizon, oars rising and falling like the heartbeat of a giant. From the shore, fishermen watched as the sea darkened beneath their hulls. The wind carried the sound of drums, the clash of brenns, the scent of pine and pitch. Somewhere among the ships, hidden behind the discipline of iron and oak, was a new invention, a secret that would defy centuries of naval tradition. They called it the Corvus, the Raven. In the hours to come, it would soar, strike, and drag an empire beneath the waves. This is the story of Ecnomus, the day the sea itself became Roman. Before the clash at Ecnomus, the Mediterranean was not a sea, it was a throne. Whoever ruled its waters ruled the world. For centuries, that throne belonged to Carthage, a glittering city rising from the North African coast. Her harbors crowded with ships, her markets humming with the gold of Spain and the grain of Sicily. She was a merchant empire built in wind and salt, proud, ancient, uncertain of her supremacy. To the north stood Rome, still young, a republic of farmers, soldiers, and dreamers. Her power was born not of trade, but of will. Her people conquered by marching farther, building faster, enduring longer. Inland, her legions were unmatched. But the sea, that was another world, a world of currents, sails, and bronze rams that crushed hulls like eggshells. When war came in 264 BC, the First Punic War, it began as a struggle for Sicily, a single island between the two giants. But it soon became something far greater, a test of who would shape the destiny of the Western world. For over 10 years, both sides bled across that island's volcanic soil. Cities fell, armies vanished, yet victory always drifted toward Carthage, not because her soldiers were braver, but because her ships commanded the sea. Whenever Rome gained ground, the Carthaginian fleet struck back. Their ships supplied new troops, new weapons, new hope. Rome could win 100 battles in land and still lose the war, because the sea refused to be conquered. And so the Senate faced a truth that chilled even its proudest generals. As long as Carthage ruled the waves, Rome could never rule the world. The answer came not from tradition, but from desperation. The Republic decided to build something it had never possessed, a navy. Not a handful of fishing boats or merchant ships, but an armada. Over 300 quinquiremes, massive war galleys with 5 banks of oars, each demanding hundreds of men to row and fight. But Rome had no sailors, no heritage of the sea, no time to learn. So they did what Rome always did when faced with the impossible: they copied, adapted, and overcame. According to the historian Polybius, the Romans captured a Carthaginian ship and used it as a medal, reverse engineering the pride of their enemy plank by plank. Whether myth or fact, the feat was astonishing. In less than 60 days, a nation of land warriors built a fleet that could challenge a civilization of sailors. But ships were only wood and rope. To win, Rome needed to transform the sea into a battlefield her soldiers could understand. And so, in the workshops along the Tiber, engineers forged something new, a wooden bridge, 12 meters long, with an iron spike at its end. When dropped, it could pin 2 ships together. Its name meant the Raven. With this device, the ocean itself could be turned into solid ground, the kind Rome's legions knew how to conquer. What Carthage saw as fluid and shifting, Rome saw as discipline and geometry. In that difference between motion and order, between mastery and invention, the fate of empires was decided. The year was 256 BC. The Roman fleet, 330 ships strung, prepared to cross from Sicily to Africa. Behind every oar stroke beat the same thought: the Republic must not merely survive, it must learn to rule the sea. Dawn crept across the waters of Sicily like a blade of light. From the cliffs near Cape Ecnomus, fishermen watched in silence as two worlds prepared to collide. Below them, the sea was alive, a forest of masts, sails, and oars stretching to the horizon. In one side, the Roman fleet 330 warships, each manned by rows of sweating legionaries and hastily trained rowers. Their armor glinted beneath the rising sun. Between the war galleys, slower transports carried horses, grain, and the hopes of an invasion. In the other side, the Carthaginian armada 350 ships, sleek and swift, crewed by men born to the sea. The descendants of Phoenician mariners who had crossed the known world before Rome even had a name. At the center of it all stood Hamilcar, Carthage's veteran admiral. He knew the sea's moods like a man knows his heartbeat. To him, the Roman fleet was a parade of arrogance, soldiers playing at sailors, marching in straight lines upon a restless element. His plan was as elegant as it was lethal. He would feign a retreat with his center, luring the Roman wedge into open water. Then, from both flanks, his faster squadrons would close in, enveloping the enemy as a hunter traps its prey. Speed and deception, that was how Carthage won. Yet the Romans had built the fleet knit for grace, but for discipline. At the head of the formation sailed the twin flagships of Consuls Marcus Atilius Regulus and Lucius Manlius Vulso. They commanded their ships as if they were legions, precise, methodical, unyielding. The Roman line advanced in a giant wedge, a formation never before seen in water. At its tip were the two Consuls. Behind them, the second line guarded the vulnerable transports. The third line held reserves. It was not the fluid dance of seasoned sailors, it was the march of an army upon the waves. The wind stiffened. Oars dipped on rows in perfect rhythm. The drumbeats echoed like thunder across the sea. Then, silence. For a long moment, both fleets drifted under a burning sky, the water rippling between them like molten glass. Hamilcar gave the signal. Horns blared. The Carthaginian center moved forward, Bren's rams gleaming beneath the waves. The flanks spread wide like wings. From the Roman flagship, Regulus watched the enemy's approach. He did not see the sea as Hamilcar did, alive and shifting. To him, it was a battlefield waiting for order. Steady, he commanded. Wait for them. As the distance closed, the air filled with the sound of wood creaking, oars slapping, men shouting in Latin and Punic. The smell of pitch and salt thickened the air. Then came the first impact. Two ships colliding with the force of a thunderclap. The Carthaginian ram tore through Roman hulls. Water poured in. Men screamed. But before Carthage could break the line, the Romans unleashed their secret. From the masts of the warships swung massive wooden bridges, the Corvus. Each one hung like a poised weapon, its iron beak glinting in the sunlight. As the first Carthaginian ship came within reach, the Romans released it. The Corvus crashed down with a roar, its iron spike biting deep into the enemy deck. The two ships locked together, no longer two but one. Across the wooden bridge, Roman legionaries charged, shields up, swords ready. The sea, once Carthage's domain, had just turned into Roman ground. Hamilcar frowned from his command deck. This was not the battle he expected. His plan relied in motion and precision, in the grace of the sea. But Rome had turned grace into gravity. The fight was no longer about speed. It was about strength. All around, the sound of ramming gave way to the clash of steel and the cries of men locked in brutal, hand-to-hand combat. What had begun as a naval duel was becoming something far more terrible. A land battle fought in floating wood and blood. And it had only just begun. The sea roared like a living beast. Waves exploded against wooden hulls. Bren's rams split the water. The air was thick with salt, sweat, and smoke. Across the horizon, hundreds of ships collided in a storm of splinters and screams. The Carthaginian plan unfolded with perfect precision, at first. Hamilcar's center drew the Romans forward, retreating just enough to lure them away from the safety of their transports. His flanks spread like wings, ready to strike. The sea was his ally, the wind his weapon. But the Corvus, that strange wooden monster, changed everything. Each time a Carthaginian galley darted in for the kill, the Roman bridge came crashing down. Iron met oak with a shriek. Decks locked. Soldiers stormed across as if stepping into solid earth. In those narrow plunks, the legionaries fought as they always had, shield to shield, blade to blade, every strike measured, every movement rehearsed in dust on blood-lung before they ever saw the sea. In moments, speed meant nothing. The proud sailors of Carthage, as of Phoenicia's maritime empire, found themselves trapped in brutal combat, their agility useless against the weight of Roman order. One after another, Carthaginian ships fell silent, their decks slick with blood, the banners sinking beneath the waves. Hamilcar shouted new orders, trying to salvage the plan, pull back, regroup, strike the flanks. But the signals vanished in the smoke. The drums were drowned by the cries of dying men. What was meant to be a feigned retreat became a real one. From the Roman flagship, Regulus saw the enemy falter. "Advance," he roared. The Roman wedge pressed forward, smashing through the weakened center. Oars snapped, ships capsized. Carthaginian admirals watched in disbelief as the sea, their ancient ally, turned against them. And yet, amid the chaos, a new danger emerged. Behind the Roman lines, the slow-moving transport ships, heavy with horses, supplies, and thousands of soldiers, drifted dangerously exposed. From the western flank, Hanno, Carthage's other commander, saw his chance. "Now!" he cried. His fleet turned, slicing through the waves with lethal speed. His plan was simple: burn the transports, starve the invasion, and crush Rome before it ever reached Africa. The Roman escort squadrons moved to intercept, smaller ships, fewer men, but hearts of iron. The wind shifted, whipping smoke into their faces. The sea boiled with motion. The Roman defenders dragged their transports toward shallower water, cutting the ropes that bound them together. There, the larger Carthaginian vessels could not maneuver. The Romans formed a line, a wall of prows aimed at the open sea. Once more, the Corvus descended. One by one, the attacking ships impaled themselves in Roman iron. The bridges drept like the wings of some mechanical beast, binding ship to ship, man to man. The ocean vanished beneath the violence. It was no longer blue, it was red on brown, the color of blood on timber. For hours, the battle raged. The sky dimmed with smoke. The air trembled with the crash of wood on the roar of men locked in combat. From the hills above the cape, witnesses later said it was as if two forests had caught fire up in the sea. By midday, the tide itself seemed to slow, choked by wreckage on corpses. And still, neither side yielded. In the Carthaginian flagship, Hamilcar stood bloody but unbroken. He could not comprehend how these clumsy soldiers, these land-born fools, were dismantling a century of naval mastery. In the Roman decks, Regulus watched the Corvus strike again and again, turning case into discipline, the sea into strategy. He understood something the Carthaginians never had. War was not about comfort. It was about control. Even when the world shifted beneath their feet, the Romans forced it into order. As the sun began to descend, the horizon became a graveyard of splintered hulls. Masts leaned like broken spears. Smoke rose in black columns. The center of the Carthaginian line collapsed. The wings, isolated and exhausted, fought in fragments. Hamilcar tried to regroup, but by the time his ships turned, the Romans had already encircled them. The hunter had become the hunted. The once mighty fleet of Carthage, mistress of the seas, now drifted, shattered. Among the waves she had ruled for centuries. Polybius would later write that over 30,000 Carthaginian sailors were killed or captured, and 64 ships taken intact. The Romans lost only a fraction, though 10,000 men still perished in the struggle. As night fell, the Mediterranean lay silent except for the creak of wreckage and the distant cries of the dying. The sea had a new master. The victory at Ecnomus was more than a triumph of arms. It was a transformation of power itself. A land-born republic had learned to breathe upon the water. Where Carthage saw waves on wind, Rome saw pattern on purpose. In that difference, an empire was born. When the sea grew quiet, Rome listened to the sound of its own heartbeat. The waves Cape Ecnomus shimmered with wreckage, splintered masts, torn sails, and biddies drifting like fallen leaves. Smoke clung to the horizon. The smell of pitch and blood lingered for days. For centuries, sailors had whispered that the sea bowed only to Carthage. That day, it bent to Rome. In the following weeks, the Roman consuls prepared to do what no power before them had dared, carry war across the Mediterranean and strike the enemy in its own soil. The ships landed in the African coast, the red banners of the Republic snapping in the headwind. The invasion itself would end in disaster, the consul Regulus captured, his army destroyed. But the lesson of Ecnomus could not be undone. Rome had learned to master the one element it once feared. The Corvus, the wooden bridge that turned sea into land, had already served its purpose. It would soon fall out of use, heavy and dangerous in stormy waters. But its true legacy was not in the iron spike that shattered decks. It was in the mindset it revealed. Adaptation. Will. The refusal to accept the limits of nature. Where others saw impossibility, Rome saw an engineering problem. And so, from that day on, the Republic became something more than a land power. It became a civilization of builders, not just of walls and roads, but of ideas. Carthage would rise again, led by a new commander named Hannibal Barca, but the tide of history had already turned. The sea that once belonged to Carthage now carried Rome's destiny toward empire. History remembers the victors, but it honors the innovators. From the bloodied waters of Ecnomus rose a truth that shaped the ages. Power does not come from experience alone, but from the courage to reinvent. If stories like this remind you that even the smallest idea can alter the course of the world, subscribe and journey with us through the forgotten chapters of history. Because in every battle, across every age, one lesson endures: the greatest weapon is the human will to adapt.